Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of two webinars, one this evening broadly on arts and humanities and one on Thursday where we look at sciences. I know some of you will have visited the school on open days, on open mornings and open afternoons, but of course tonight is the chance for you to hear from subject specialists, and of course in the sixth form, that's really important. So whether you're attending from Bishop Wordsworth School or a prospective pupil or parent, you're really welcome to this evening's webinar. My name's Matthew Morgan and I'm the headmaster here. In a moment, you'll hear from the head of sixth form, Mrs. Lambard, and then after that, you'll also hear from Mrs. Armstrong, who's our head of careers this evening. Now, she's not head of careers this evening, she's always our head of careers, in fact, but she is here this evening and she will actually introduce every individual subject specialist and be there to monitor questions and answers. So do please put some questions in the chat box, which we'll try to answer as well. We know that it's a really important time for both parents and students, and therefore, we try to provide you with as much information as possible, but I would encourage you to come and visit the school in person. And the next opportunity to do that is on the 7th of November in the evening for our open evening. And this will be a chance to meet more informally with subject staff and maybe pick up on some key themes or questions you have that have come to your mind after this evening's webinar. But it's really good to welcome you this evening and I hope you find it really useful. I'd just like to end my introduction by thanking all those staff, the technical staff behind the scenes who make this possible, but also the subject staff for giving up their time, and of course Mrs. Armstrong and Mrs. Lambard. And that's a good segue, I guess, into introducing you to Mrs. Lambard, our head of sixth form.
Hello and good evening. So welcome to our webinar. Subjects obviously play a huge part in joining sixth form. Our average students take 3 subjects plus an optional extra, but some do take 4. And over the next 2 evenings, you'll be able to find out a little bit more about all those subject choices. Some of them will be very familiar to you. You will have done your core subjects at GCSE, and some of them will be completely new. And you may have questions. Please do feel free to put them in the Q&A box where we'll do our best to answer them. And if you have more or want to meet with people in person, come to our big open evening on the 7th of November. As Mr. Morgan said, it's no substitute for actually visiting. It is lovely to see people online and to find out more information online, but there is no substitute for actually visiting the school. And we have, as well as the open evening, 2 more open afternoons where you can see the school in daylight, because obviously as the evenings draw in, it's getting darker. What I'll do is I'll put a link on the chat, so where you put your questions and answers, I'll put a link to where you can find both the application form and where you can also find where to sign up for these events, because we do have a limited capacity, particularly on the open afternoons, less so on the evening. That's about all I've got to say for the moment. I will wrap up at the end of the evening, but I really hope you gain a lot of information, you enjoy the evening, and you connect with some subjects which you will go and study in future. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really nice to see you all here this evening. We're going to run through the arts and humanities subject. We're generally going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to be starting with art, followed by classical civilization, followed by English literature, but we're saving economics and business until the end. The setup through the evening is very much the same. Each head of department is going to outline what it is you're going to be studying, tell you a little bit about their subjects, highlight some of the best bits of the 2 years that you can get to know during your time at Bishop's, and then we will have the Q&A. So I'm going to run the Q&A for each subject. Some of these will be answered in the Q&A itself. Some of them I will pose to the head of department as we go along. We want to keep on a pretty tight schedule tonight, so some questions we may not be able to cover. If that's the case, please do email us. We'd be very happy to answer your question if we don't manage to cover it this evening. So the first department we are going to move over to is art. Art has become an incredibly strong department in Bishop's sixth form. Mrs. Lawrence is the head of department, and she has a great team that works with her to deliver all sorts of artistic, creative subjects within the school. You can begin to see the entry requirements on the initial slide here, and I'm sure Mrs. Lawrence will tell us more about it as we go along. Good evening, Sam. Are you there and ready to go?
Yeah, I'm here if you can hear me.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, so like Mrs. Armstrong just said, I'm Mrs. Lawrence, stole one of my lines. We also have two other art teachers in the department, Mrs. Smith-Edmonds. She's been with us about a year now. Her specialist area is graphic design, the same as mine. And then we have another teacher, Mrs. Redmill, whose specialist area is fine art. And then we're also really fortunate to have 3 art technicians, and they all have different specialist areas. So ceramics, graphic design as well, and also textiles and fashion. So we really do kind of cover all of the different areas of art and design within all of us. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So a little bit about the course. So we offer 3 different A levels at Bishop's, not just kind of fine art. We actually don't offer fine art at all. We offer graphic communication, photography, and art, craft and design, and they're all under the AQA specification. So you can come in and you can choose any of those, and you can switch if you want to, because some people might have never done graphics before, and they might have done art at their school and then come in and suddenly really like graphics. So obviously graphics and photography, everyone knows what they are, but art, craft and design is kind of the course for people that maybe don't know what area of art they want to do, because it covers all of the different things. So you can do photography, graphics, 3D design, textiles, all of those come under the art, craft and design umbrella. So a little bit about year 12. So year 12 really is kind of all about skills and building things up ready for the later part of year 12 and for when you go into year 13. So the course is made up of component 1, component 2. So component 1 is what we refer to as the coursework, the portfolio. And in year 12, you're kind of practicing, you're getting ready for that. So within art and photography, you're given an initial project and the theme is structures. And for art, the focus will be kind of drawing techniques, looking at different medias. And then within photography, you're really learning about how to use the camera, how to use all the digital editing software, and just also kind of understand how to put a project together, how to fulfill the assessment objectives. And then within graphic design as well, you'll do a first kind of shorter, more intense project that will run alongside the structures project for photography and for art. And that will be on branding. And again, the main focus for that project is just to teach the students how to almost put a project together in preparation for their big project, which is called the personal investigation. So those kind of small projects are part of component 1, which is portfolio, which is 60% of the grade. And then if we go on to the next slide, please. So within component 1, so once you've kind of in all of those different A levels done your first project, which is kind of the skills-based project, you'll do something called your personal investigation. This counts for 60% of your actual grade, and you'll write your own brief for this project. So it can be anything really that you're interested in at all. So I've put on the screen here some kind of topics from the past. So within art, we've obviously got kind of things like identity, distortion. Within photography, you might focus on a particular kind of photography, like commercial photography, documentary, or you might make a short film. And then within graphics, most of our students tend to kind of go down the advertising, branding kind of route at the moment. So that project will start at in March of year 12, and that will run right through till the end of January in year 13. And that project for all of the different A levels will make up the 60% of the grade, and it's marked throughout your time at Bishop's continually, and then it will be finally marked at the end of January in year 13, where you'll receive your kind of raw mark. Obviously grades change every year depending on grade boundaries, and we also will have an external moderator come in and check our marks, but you'll kind of know roughly the mark that you're on for 60% at the end of January in year 13. And then the second component 2 is what we refer to as the exam, which is kind of true in the sense that it is an exam because it ends with a controlled assessment, but it is essentially just a shorter project. So everyone in the country will receive an exam paper at the beginning of February in year 13, whether you're doing graphics, art or photography, and there will be 8 starting points on that paper, and you will choose one, and then the students will just do another kind of 10-week project, exactly the same as the personal investigation, but it will just be a lot more short and intense. And then that will end at the beginning of May, where all the students will sit a 3-day exam in the art studio, and they'll complete a final piece for that second project, so the component 2 exam project. So it might be that they build a website in graphics, it might be that they take a series of photographs and animate them in photography. It might be that they do something ceramics based for art. So it can be whatever you want at the end. So that's 40%, component 1 is 60%, and then we send all those marks off, and then we have a moderator come in the summer who kind of checks our marks. So that's year 13. Please can I have the next slide? Thank you. So highlights, as I said at the start of this presentation, so we have 3 teachers, we all have different specialist areas, which is really good. And we're really lucky to have our 3 technicians who work part-time over the week. We've got really good facilities. All the students have access to the Creative Cloud, which is fantastic. So they've got access to all of the different programs within that. There is a small printmaking studio in the department. We have a kiln, we have sewing machines, we have digital cameras which we loan out, digital drawing tablets. We have a kind of mini studio set up in the art department if you want to take a studio-based photography. And then obviously we have all the traditional things, paint, things that you need like that. So yeah, we have all the facilities that you probably would need. We take part in lots of competitions, so local and wider. Pupils take part in exhibitions as well. We have a creative arts end of year show to showcase all of the work, obviously for the moderator, but also for pupils to kind of show off their work to their parents, because it's a lot of work over the 2 years. The pass rate is really high. So graphic design this year, 100% of the students got an A to an A star. Photography was 100% A star to B, and then art, craft and design was 75% A star to B. So the grades are pretty good. Also, if you're doing an art-based subject, you get to use one of your supervised studies, obviously, as well as your free periods, not your other supervised. You get to come over to the art room. And I've just wrote here also, if you want to read more about the full specification, it's all linked on our website, so you can go on there and find out more information if you want to. Please can I have the next slide? Thank you. So trips and activities. So in the sixth form, you'll visit London twice, and we kind of mix up where we go when we go to London. So we've been to places like the Tate Modern, the National Gallery, the Portrait Gallery, Hayward Gallery for the artists. Our designers have visited live design studios. They've met with Cartilage Levine, a studio based in Islington. We're just about to take the students up to something called the London Illustration Fair, where they'll get to meet real life illustrators and talk to them about their work. We'll probably go in the summer to something called D&AD, which is an exhibition where all of the degree students exhibit their work in Shoreditch. So that's another really good thing for students to go and meet people at the next level on from them, to see what it's like to kind of be at the end of a degree. Also, we have lots of local kind of museums and workshops and things going on around near us. So we're really lucky to be in Salisbury and to be near the cathedral. There's so much going on in the cathedral close. We've just taken part in some stone carving at the cathedral, which I think the students really enjoyed. And it's just the trips are just really good to kind of get the students thinking more, to give them new ideas, and just to kind of help inform their own work really. So please can I have the next slide, thank you. So destinations, I'm not going to list all the universities, because over the years the students have gone to many different universities ranging, you know, all over the country, but most of our students at the moment tend to do something called an art foundation. So you don't have to do an art foundation as the next step. An art foundation is a free course which kind of bridges the gap between A-levels and a degree, and it's just a chance to really explore all of the areas of art and design that you might not have studied at A-level. So AUB Bournemouth down the road actually has a really good foundation course, and a lot of our students now that are going on to do art are going there first, but we've had students go to Goldsmiths, Falmouth, lots of different universities who haven't done the foundation as well, go on to do architecture. So art opens a lot of doors. There's lots of places you can go with art, design, photography. I think that might be the end of the slide. I think it might be questions slide next. Yeah, so I don't know whether you wanted to ask me any questions, Mrs. Armstrong.
Yes, please, Mrs. Lawrence, that would be great. So the question that I often get asked when I'm talking to students about A-level choices is the amount of time that taking A-level art actually takes up, because sometimes a project takes much longer than perhaps writing an essay for English or whatever. Could you give some reassurance about the amount of time involved, please?
Yeah, so obviously you can't do anything, you know, good in life super quickly, and art does take a long time. There's no denying, I can't sugarcoat the fact that art does take a lot of time. And the same as graphics, the same as photography, you can't just suddenly become amazing at any of them. You have to build up your skills. That's kind of what I was talking about, year 12. So yes, it will take time. You have a lot of lessons, you have a lot of supervised study, you have a lot of frees in the school. If you manage your time well, it shouldn't take any more time than other subjects. It's just it's a definite slow and steady thing with art, and it's something that you have to do a little and often all the time to kind of get better. That being said, the two projects are essentially coursework, so there is no written exam at the end, so you do have to work consistently through the 2 years. You can't just kind of revise at the end and hope to get an A star. All the people last year that have done really well, and that was nearly all of them, work consistently over the 2 years. So you put in what you get out, really, don't you? I think with anything in life.
Absolutely, but the art department rooms are available when students need them to be, you know, like lunch times and things like that. They can
art is basically open 24/7. It's open all the time. They can come in whenever they want, really, as long as we have a little bit of room. We'll fit you in. It's like an open door policy, really. So yeah,
fantastic. Okay, thank you. And just very quickly before we move on to the next subject, what are you looking for in a student who wants to do any of the 3 disciplines within art?
I just think the main thing is kind of enthusiasm and passion and the wanting to do it, I think, and the willingness to try and make mistakes and not worry that you're not going to get it right straight away, because nobody is a brilliant artist straight away. Maybe my colleague, actually, Mrs. Redmill, is a fantastic artist. But I think that, you know, just giving it a go, really, and like accepting help and learning from us and learning from each other. And obviously, even, you know, with the graphics and photography, there's so much stuff now that even I and my colleagues don't know, and just having that appetite for learning, independent learning as well. I think that's what we're looking for, really, in art.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So now we're going to move on to our second subject of the evening. Mr. Owen, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Brilliant. Hello, welcome to the evening. You're going to talk to us about classical civilization, and could you also say a word about the opportunities for Latin within the timetable or outside, please?
Yeah, will do. You see here, my name's on the slide here, and what our entry requirements are. We do largely essay writing or short answer questions, and so we're looking for students that have got a 6 in any of the humanities subjects, English, RS, anything like that, would be great. I have a colleague, Mr. Molteni, who teaches the course alongside me, so you will meet the two of us. And both of us also teach Latin within the school. And so I'll come back to that at the end, but that is a possibility in the sixth form. So next slide, please. Yeah. So we have in year 12, you can see on the left here, an image of it's quite graphic, I know, but of the Odyssey, one of the myths that we have to study. In our course, which is run by OCR, the world of the hero is compulsory, and so anyone studying OCR in the country will be doing either the Odyssey or the Iliad. Our choice has been the Odyssey, and that's running during the year, and my colleague has been teaching that. And on the Roman side, because it's classical civilization, sorry, I should maybe have said this at the start, the classical civilization is looking at the Greeks and the Romans, and so we try to divide our course into both. And so in the first year, we also teach about the Roman Republic, as you can see there, and its fall. And I mentioned, you can see on the slide there, the name of Julius Caesar, which I'm sure you've heard of. But we look at all the events that surround the end of the Republic and the start of a new regime. So you can see from these two slides, I think, that part of our course is literature based. And so anyone coming to us, with English Lit will have an idea of how we examine the book and the stories. And on the right-hand side, you can see there that there's a lot of history to what we do as well. So those that have studied history will come to us with the skills that we require. Those skills, as you know, will involve being able to analyze sources and to pick out the information that is important, and to be able to sift out some of the things that aren't important. But we hope that at the same time as looking at it as an academic study, that there's a lot of enjoyment in it as well. If I could have the next slide, please. In year 13, our second year, I mentioned that the epic side of it, the hero side of it, is compulsory. So on the left there, you can see that we look at the Roman side of epic poetry, the Roman side of epic myth and mythology and those sort of things. And it's interesting, we find, to see the differences between how the Greeks looked at heroes and how the Romans looked at heroes. And we hope that we would convince you also that that once we sort of read these books, it's not just about finding out the events, but it's finding out about the whole life, how these people lived, what was important to them. And you can see in some of the images down below how they lived, what they made. And we hope that you'd be fascinated to learn how they did live and what we have now taken from them and still practice today. On the right-hand side, you'll see that we look at art. And so it's interesting that we're following art because we also have a sort of art historical look at what they built. You see the famous temple in the middle there, the Parthenon that I mentioned, but also some of the pottery they made, the statues they made, what they made them from, who they're about, why, the stories. And I hope again, and truly believe that you'd be fascinated by what you learn about the Greeks and the Romans and what we have learned from them. For those of you that maybe haven't looked at Greek myths since you were in primary school, some of those stories are super relevant to what we look at. And if you enjoyed them as a child, we hope you would enjoy and bring some knowledge to what we study when we look at this art work as well. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, you can see from, again, the images on here, the highlights. We do like to make trips, we do like to make visits. The two that you can see here are a couple of the Greek sites we've been to. I have to say that we can't always get out there if we haven't got the numbers, but we're always hopeful we're going to have the numbers. Well, we can't make a foreign trip. We very much like to do more local things. So as you heard with art, we also like to get to the museums in London, Oxford, to the Roman baths over at in Bath itself. So we also like to walk where the ancients walked. And I think some of the highlights you'll find as well, if you're reading through the slide as I'm talking, is that there's sort of a resurgence at the moment with myth and epic retelling of stories in popular culture, and we think that that's because the stories that we will teach you about and you will learn with us do have that sort of almost timeless quality to them, and there's some fantastic things on TV at the moment, and I'm hoping that those of you that are interested in classical civilization will be getting the opportunity and be watching those series on the TV. Yeah, I think the other thing that I've tried to say there is a key highlight is that one of our highlights is seeing when students not only when something they learn something that they're learning for the first time and it dawns on them where it started and where it's come from. We love when those light bulb moments, but also we do think we produce happy students, successful students, the students who by the end of their time with us are very confident talking about and analysing, whether it's artwork or literature, whatever that might be. The next slide, please. Yeah, co-curricular activities, trips. I've mentioned some about local and international visits, but we do like the fact also that we're part of a classics association and organisation where we have visiting lecturers come in. We go to other establishments to hear those lecturers. We have also links with our own history society, and we really again enjoy it when we can do something jointly and we can join them because they they have brought in a speaker on something ancient, and we can also join in with them and see how the classics impacts on modern history. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. I was thinking as I was compiling this list of various things that people have done while studying classical civilization, and as you look there, some things might leap out and you think, well, I wouldn't have put classics with medicine, for instance, and that's because some of our students have chosen classics alongside STEM subjects, and in the over the 30 years that I've been doing this, there really has been every kind of job outcome out there. So I'm hoping that you get an idea there of the breadth and how studying the classics, studying a humanities doesn't close all the doors to you. And there's lots there. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, I've gone through it fairly quickly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're getting a bit pushed for time, so I'm just going to ask one question, Mr. Owen, if that's all right.
Of course.
I think when students think about classics, they very much think, oh, do I need to know Latin? Do I need to know ancient Greek before I sign up for it? Is this the case, please?
No, not at all. Not at all. Any Latin phrases or Greek phrases that you would need, we would teach you. There are some in our vocabulary that you will need to make successful answers to questions. No, none of that is required for classical civilization. If, on the other hand, you wanted to study Latin with us, I did say I'd come back, then yes, I would probably expect a grade 7 at Latin GCSE, and then you could talk to us about it. And just with time in mind, when we have our November evening, please come and talk to me about Latin if you have an interest in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Owen. That was really useful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to go across to the English department. Are you there, Mr. Enu?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Absolutely. Fantastic.
Fabulous. I'm not going to my camera on, I'm afraid, because we're in the process of moving house and you don't want to see the chaos.
Brilliant. I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I once heard it said that literature is the only subject in which you truly understand what it is to exist, think and feel as a human being. Other disciplines do this, but I don't believe any do so quite as completely as English literature. So my name is Craig Enu. I've been head of English at Bishops for quite a long time now. My second in department, Sally White, is also very well established. So you're in the hands of very experienced professionals with us who know literature and really love their subject. Compared to other subjects, our entry requirements are fairly modest. We know that the vast majority of our students really enjoy the subject. The more you enjoy it, the better you're going to be. So it's not unusual for our students to come in with fairly modest GCSE grades, but to leave with B's, A's, or even A stars. If you're looking at science and maths subjects as options, literature is an outside possibility, but give it some serious thought. We find that students who study literature as a 4th A level, if that's what you want to do, see it as a kind of break subject, somewhere different where they can talk, think and feel a little bit differently than their other subjects. And we've even had a couple of students who have used it as a break subject, a 4th subject, and then actually gone on to choose it as a degree option. So we have a student who is currently studying English literature at Oxford, who's in that situation. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so onto our course. In year 12, we divide lessons between 2 teachers. One teacher delivers paper 1, which is drama and poetry pre-1900, and the second paper 2, which is called the comparative and contextual study paper. So we settle you into year 12 with a series of introductory lessons. This includes a kind of tour of the history of English literature and also an introduction to studying the Gothic. And during this time, we'll also equip you with study and research toolkits. Our work in paper 1 begins about 2 weeks in with the study of Shakespeare's final masterpiece, The Tempest. We then enter the world of the enigmatic Victorian poet, Christina Rossetti. And finally, we begin task 1 of our non-examined assessment or coursework. And there we study Carol Ann Duffy's The World's Wife. For the creative among you, this is a chance to write your own verse inspired by the words of Carol Ann Duffy. On the paper 2 side of the course, we introduce you to the weird and wonderful world of Gothic literature. We build your knowledge of Gothic literature by developing a set of critical analysis skills with unseen extracts. And after this, you'll study Angela Carter's dark and often gruesome modern takes on classic fairy tales, The Bloody Chamber. Finally, you then move on to the NEA task on this side of the course, comparing American playwright Tennessee Williams' classic A Streetcar Named Desire and Ian McEwan's modern novel Atonement. So next slide, please. At the start of year 13, both paper 1 and paper 2 teachers will introduce new texts. For paper 1, we study John Webster's remarkable revenge tragedy, The Duchess of Malfi. And aspects of this text are compared back to Rossetti's poetry that we studied in year 12. And by that point, you'll be really familiar with that poetry. Over to paper 2 teacher. The paper 2 teacher will guide you through the study of Bram Stoker's seminal Gothic horror, Dracula. You would have read that over the summer between years 12 and 13, and you compare Dracula back with The Bloody Chamber. Your knowledge and understanding of these tests is obviously then assessed during mock exams, which run in January in year 13. Year 13 also gives you the opportunity to revisit your coursework with guidance from your teacher. And we'll also, of course, revisit, consolidate and revise the year 12 texts, making you exam ready. And next slide, please. Okay, so what do English lessons look like at grade level? Well, the majority of our lessons are actually discussion based. So this involves you using your independent study time to read and prepare sections of the text we're studying. You can take part in lively debates and discussions in class. They might be in smaller groups or one-on-ones or with the class as a whole. And during that time, we help you build your written and spoken communication skills, something that we like to think we're pretty good at. We're really in favour of students taking pride and responsibility in their notes. So we will check your note taking occasionally and we'll help you build your note taking skills. Our set sizes are quite nice, typically around 10 to 15, which is perfect for discussion. This means that we have more time to help individual students as well. And you'll be assessed formally on each side of the course about once every 6 weeks. We've subscribed to some really excellent study resources, including recently BBC Maestro, which we're very excited about, and also a wonderful resource called Massonet. And if you apply these well, they can enhance your understanding and ability to critique literature. We use a kind of a taxonomy system to help you approach literature in a creative a way as possible. And on our side of the course, we believe arts to be just as important as sciences for this reason. Through every step of the course, you're going to be guided by a team of experienced, compassionate and friendly teachers. And we recognise the importance of being both supportive and approachable to our students. Next slide, please. We regularly book visits to theatres, especially if productions of set texts are running. We've done this every year to date, and we like to take students to the best productions. So we often go to productions by the Royal Shakespeare Company or the National Theatre. We go to the Globe, to the West End or Stratford. We also invite guest speakers into Bishops. Last year we had an expert on Shakespeare's first folio. He actually brought in one of the few remaining copies and gave a fascinating talk. And in the past, we've had writers, lecturers from major institutions as well. Many of our students like to get involved with debating and public speaking. We've got a really good record in that. The school enters competitions on a yearly basis, and Miss White, one of our A-level teachers, runs and organises the latter as well. Loads of other activities you can get involved with linked to literature, such as editing and creating the school magazine. We've got a mentoring scheme to help younger students who might struggle with literacy. You might want to become a library prefect, working again with younger students or running poetry workshops over lunchtimes. Next slide, please. In terms of our student destinations, we're really proud that our students love the subject. Last year, over half of our A-level students went on to study this subject at the best universities in the country, which I think is a really good statistic. Most end up at good Russell Group unis, such as Exeter, Bath, Durham, Bristol. And in most, if not all years, we will see students go on to study literature at either Oxford or Cambridge. And as a school, we do all we can to prepare students for those routes. So English is our favourite subject. I fell in love with literature when I studied at A-level. I hope you will too. For us, it's a broad base of skills and knowledge bases. It means that students can move into loads of different career pathways with these things under their belts. Our students have gone into law, journalism, publishing, marketing, education. There's even a guy I know who's now running his own microbrewery. So the sky, as they say, is the limit. So yeah, over for any questions. I don't know how much time we've got left.
Okay, just a couple if that's all right, Mr. Enyu. Does a student really need to come to English literature A-level having read hundreds of books?
No, not at all. You don't actually need to be an avid reader to study English literature. Obviously, it helps. We want people to come onto the course who enjoy reading, and it really helps if you've enjoyed, say, the literature text that you've been studying at GCSE. But as long as you have an open mind towards the literature you're going to be studying, and you genuinely have enjoyed reading, it will be fine. You'll probably read about 9 texts overall over the course of the A-level, including the NEA texts. And there is reading extracts and critical material on top of that, but there isn't a huge amount to tackle.
Okay, and I think also when it comes to writing essays, do you help students with that? And could you give me an idea of just how many there are?
Well, as I've said, we tend to set an essay on each side of the course once every 6 weeks. So you're probably doing an essay every 3 weeks. Now, as we get into the second half of year 13, that hots up a lot. So there's a lot of practice essays going on, and we really give students the opportunity to write as many practice essays as they like. And if you write them, we'll mark them. But yeah, we find that actually quite a few students really enjoy writing essays once they're on the course. So we give a lot of good advice on how to plan, research and draft, and also how to write in the appropriate critical style. And we also see a huge amount of massive progress in many of our students in terms of their improvement in being able to write essays.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Enyu.
Thank you.
Now
Thank you for having me.
Head over to the Geography Department, and I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Toner.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Over to you for Geography.
Right, hello. Right, Geography. I'll try to be as brief as possible because we are sort of overrunning a little bit. But just a little bit of background about the department. You obviously need a grade 6 in Geography at GCSE to obviously study A-level Geography. There are 2 teachers at A-level. Myself, I teach the physical side of the course, physical geography, and Mrs. Jones, who teaches the human geography side of the course. So that's generally how the course is split over the year. There are 4 components to the A-level. There's the physical paper, there's the human paper, there's what we call a synoptic paper, which is paper 3, which is an overview of the whole sort of geography, I suppose. And finally, there's the NEA, which is the independent investigation, which is accounts for 20% of the total grade. Okay, so next slide, please. Thank you. In year 12, we study the following topics that you can see on the slide there. Obviously, I teach personally the physical side, so I'm teaching at the moment coastal landscapes and change, which is a real passion of mine. So much so I'm speaking to you from the cliff top in beautiful Boscombe, just 3 minutes walk from the beach. We sort of learn about coastal processes. We learn about different landforms, and we learn how coastlines are managed as well, which is obviously it's something very important at the moment, especially on our coastline, bearing in mind the impact of climate change, which I'll obviously mention probably several times in the next 5 minutes. Coastal landscapes and change obviously links well with the fieldwork, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. A human topic being taught at the moment is regenerating places. So once again, I am truly living the case study because one of the places we come to is Boscombe Spa Village, a classic location for regeneration. And we'll also study places, cities, urban areas which have been re-imaged, remodeled, regenerated, like Bristol and Exeter and parts of London too as well. So that's a human topic. Another human topic is globalization. Obviously, this is about how countries are connected. Globalization is a vast topic, really, and it incorporates so many different links and connections between nations. I mean, trade would be one of them, migrations another. There are so many connections in the modern world, really. So that is quite a vast topic, really, when you think about it, when you break it down a little bit. So globalization. The second physical topic of the year as well, year 12, is tectonic processes and hazards, which is earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunami, and that's a smaller unit, and it's examined obviously at the A level at the end, of course. So you've basically got the 4 units in year 12, 2 physicals, 2 humans, and also there's the field work as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Year 13 topics, the water cycle and water security. I'm teaching this at the moment with my year 13s. We've been looking today at water security in the US. We're looking at groundwater, access to groundwater and surface water stores. The United States and India and different countries around the world, which is a huge issue. And obviously climate change is impacting on that. And that's something obviously that we need to look at, and also water quality as well. So river water quality, which is quite topical at the moment in the UK in particular. Water cycle, water security. Also, there's this the carbon cycle and energy security as well, which is the second sort of physical topic, if you like. This links really well, actually, if you study biology. There's obviously some elements of ecosystems and some sort of biological processes in there. And also, obviously, energy security as well, which is a hugely topical subject, isn't it? Bearing in mind the events in Eastern Europe and access to gas and oil and other obviously fossil fuels as well, and obviously thinking about how we can transition from fossil fuels to renewables in the future more rapidly, really. And then we have superpower geographies, which is basically this is all about inequalities, global inequalities, and how the gap can be narrowed. So things such as aspects such as this sustainable development goals, targets for development in low-income countries, which not to be too negative, we are actually on target to actually hit some of those development goals in the future as well, to actually make them, which is a positive thing, really. Also health, human rights and intervention. This is the other human topic, if you like, and studying things like the impact of pandemics such as Ebola and COVID on society, really. So so you can see obviously there's a nice balance really between physical and human units, if you like, which is obviously one of the main questions I'm asked during open evening. Okay, next topic, please. So we've got now key highlights. Just the results in 2024, 73% A star to C, which we're very pleased with. Also, I think even more pleasingly, really, half of the cohort last year now studying geography at university, which is a wonderful thing, really. I mean, obviously, there is obviously more to geography than just learning about facts. They're obviously constantly analysing, evaluating. And geographers are very, very sought after in the workplace because of obviously the skills that they're provided with at A level and at degree level. So that's fantastic, and we'd like to keep that up really in the future. Also, as one of the highlights, last year 2 bishops geographers represented the UK at the IGO Geography Olympiad in Jakarta, Indonesia. The year before that, 2 more students as well went to Helsinki, the same competition. And obviously, Eve this year as well, she went to Dublin as well. So we've had 5 geographers for the last 3 years representing the UK, which I think is quite a prestigious thing. And there's also a very thriving geography society in school. And we organise guest speakers from the world of academia and business who are coming in. And ex-students as well, actually. There was one coming in next week to talk to the students who just finished his degree. He's going to talk to some students who might want to study geography at university as well in the future. So that's quite a nice thing as well. So nice links, really. I think we're a very supportive department, really. And co-curricular activities and trips. There are 4 days of compulsory fieldwork during year 12. 2 urban days, one in Bournemouth, well, where I am now, Boscombe, just down the road. That's in a couple of weeks' time. One in London as well for regenerating places. So they're both for regenerating places. And then 2 days, one in Devon, Sidmouth, looking at coastal erosion, landforms and management. And down on the Hampshire coast as well at Milford-on-Sea for something similar too. So that's sort of 4 practice days really for field work. For the NEA, the independent investigation, which is what obviously students need to write up in year 12, and that's 20% of the final grade as well. So, and also as well, excitingly, there'll be a trip to Iceland for geographers and geologists during the Easter break in 2025. So that's very exciting. 28 students will be attending that. Okay, so that's fantastic. Okay. In terms of destinations, I mean, just a sample. I mean, obviously, geographers tend to go all over the place. Exeter, Durham, Bristol last year, Manchester and Birmingham as well. Also, I mean, in terms of employment, it's a very difficult question because geographers basically can, you know, go into all sorts of different fields, to be honest with you. But some recent ones, recent examples: somebody working for the Met Office, somebody else working for the BBC, an environment correspondent, and also the Environment Agency as well. The classics, really. Okay, thank you. And any questions, please, Simon?
Okay, actually, and one of your recent geographers, one who went to Helsinki, is now going to be a Navy pilot. So you really can do anything with geography. Could you talk a little bit about the resources that are available to students? I really got the impression from when you were talking that of the relevance of geography now in the real world. People and students can see things that are actually happening very much as they're studying it. But what resources do they have to back that up?
Oh, well, we have course textbooks. So there's one for year 12, one for year 13. So that's the standard. We follow the Edexcel specification. So there are 2 textbooks for the students. Tons of websites online. Lots of resources produced by Edexcel themselves as well available. We incorporate lots of journals, articles. Obviously, geography in the news every single day. I mean, I could open the paper today and I could use, I don't know, a multitude of articles. I mean, it's just about to rain. It's going to be a storm tonight. There might be more flooding over the next few days. This is all, you know, we're linking climate change into what's happening at this moment in time, and we are living through this and experiencing this. So, I mean, you know, in terms of resources available, they are there for us, you know, and we do incorporate them into lessons as well. But yeah, we study sort of climate change, globalization, geopolitics. I love, you know, the impacts of, say, you know, climate change on coasts and on rivers, and so it's obviously very, very current topic, and it's I think I'm slightly biased, but I think it's the most important.
I think you're allowed to be biased. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Toner. That was really interesting.
All right, lovely.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move on to history. So may I introduce you to Mr. Joyce, who's going to speak to you this evening about A-level history at Bishop's.
Hello. So talking about the most important subject, on to history. So I am second department for history. Miss Brennan is head department, but I volunteer to talk to you about history because I like talking about it tonight. So let's crack on as we're a little bit behind time. Could I have the next slide, please? So history is split into 3 components for us. We have 2 direct talk components. So our Russia side, Tsarist Communist Russia side, and the making of modern Britain. Those sides are split between 2 teachers. So I, for example, teach both sides of this year. So I teach the Russian side for a year 13 class and the Britain side for a year 12 class. Both of those sort of subtopics components focus on fairly similar historical skills and some slightly different historical skills. So they're assessed through essay work, both sides, both of them are. You'll be set in between 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 in a half term at both sides of the course, so probably 3 on one side, 2 on another perhaps, depending on how long the term is. And that will obviously differ in year 13, as various people have mentioned. There'll be more essays in year 13 as those things ramp up towards exams. And the Russia side of the course focuses on historians' extracts and historians' perspectives and evaluating them for provenance, so trustworthiness, origin, reliability. And the Britain side of the course looks at source work, so a slightly different skill, both about historical analysis, both very useful for transferring into other subjects, politics, English, transferring into history at degree level as well, but slightly different sort of approaches in those particular topics. Both sides of the course will expect you to complete about an hour of homework a week. Obviously, as people have been saying tonight as well, various times, there is a substantial commitment in terms of your own work outside of the subject, but history is a taught subject. By that I mean we will teach content throughout lessons. There is a discursive element to it. We do debate, we do discussion, but most content is directly taught in lessons, and it's up to you, particularly if you're aiming for a kind of A-star band, if that's your ambition, for you to shore up any gaps in your knowledge and really deepen your knowledge through your own work outside of the school, outside of lesson time. So those are the two elements that we have. Our third element, if we go on to the next slide, please. Thank you, is the NEA, so in old money, coursework. This starts at the end, as it says on my slide there, starts at the end of year 12, when year 12 students pick a selection of our pre-approved questions. There's a whole range of topics, which is part of the joy of the NEA, from the fall of the Roman Empire, the reasons for success of the Crusades, the reasons for the failure of the Crusades, Tudor religion and change, and the Black Death, to kind of name the 5 key ones people tend to choose, which are deliberately do not overlap with the content that we teach. It's also not allowed to, and also deliberately overlap with some interesting broad ranges of knowledge and historical knowledge, partly because it mimics what's done in the lower school in various different schools, and also partly because it also overlaps better with degree level history, really, and what tends to be focused on degree level history. But also it's mostly early modern, and that's again deliberate. So the NEA is, as I say, a piece of coursework which students are given a lot of support for, but it isn't directly taught. So those topic areas we wouldn't teach you about Tudor rebellions or whatever, but what we would do is provide a lot of one-to-one support. So for example, today in my lunch break in one of my free periods, I met individually for year 13 students, and we worked through one of their NEA drafts, and I gave them some pointers, and that's quite a common process at this point of the year, when we give some individual contact time to support year 13 to doing that, and we also provide them with a lot of support in year 12 for them to do that over the summer. The coursework is 20% of the marks overall, so it's a reasonable chunk of work to do, and again, that it builds on the good skills that pupils will build in year 12 in terms of independent work and independent study. And as I say, that really makes a difference with the coursework. It is independent. We're not allowed to, and we don't provide historians' texts or sources or reading packs. We can obviously provide access to lots of different historical work if people ask. We have a huge library of books on all of those topics, but it is something that pupils are expected to do themselves. We will give them a lot of help, a lot of feedback, but we won't directly teach it for them. Okay, next slide, please. So, key highlights. It is a history course of big characters. You've seen I've chosen a smorgasbord of historical thinkers here, and I've deliberately chosen Margaret Thatcher looking thoughtful, looking at Lenin there that you can see. So we have some heavy hitters of history here. Thatcher from the Britain course, Churchill, of course, in the Britain course, and 3 key Russian rulers, Vladimir Lenin, Ilyich Stalin, and Nicholas II, the last Tsar of the Tsarist period, of the Romanov period. So, as it mentions there, and as I've kind of alluded to already, history provides a basis in some key discursive and analytical skills: the study of text, the analysis of sources, writing for argument, writing coherently for argument, and also the analysis of historians' interpretations. All of those things are easily transferable to other subjects, and into other careers and walks of life as well. So those are kind of our greatest hits, those 5 images there. That is a very small sample to the kind of things we look at. It does make it look a bit Whiggish. We don't just study important people in history. We're not part of the kind of, we're not writing in the 1940s, but those are some key people that you will look into, and a bit of a flavour of what we might do. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, because of the nature of our course that we study, trips aren't really an option, particularly Russia at this point. We do run some overlapping politics trips, often to the Houses of Commons, Houses of Parliament. So there's an overlap there, which kind of abridges the British politics course, the Making Modern Britain course, but we don't have any other direct trips, unfortunately, because, as I say, the content that we study, it's not really viable at this point. We have a very broad and well-supported history society, which, for example, next week they're having a visit from the cathedral's archivist, and they're giving a session on conservation, getting into conservation work, which is another avenue that's open to people who've studied history. We've had all kinds of broad ranges of very interesting speakers. For example, someone who'd been part of the British Communist Party spoke last year. Obviously, they're fairly advanced in years now, but there's a whole range of things that we've talked about. And talking about range, in History Club, which is a club that open to all years, it's run by our year 13s, our history prefects in year 13, and is very well subscribed to by lower school, particularly year 8 and year 7 this year. I couldn't quite tell you why, because if you look at some of our examples of topics we've looked at, I'm not sure that history of dueling and Soviet rockets of the Cold War and Chinese Communist Party sounds that accessible to year 7, but they do seem to like it. So there we go. All of those things I've listed there were presented by pupils, which is one of the things that we really encourage History Club, getting boys and girls in sixth form to be brave and stand up in front of our very democratic and very supportive club group and present on any kind of area of interest that they might be interested in. This year, for example, we've had more sixth formers than we often do, so I've also presented myself on key concepts of history and pedagogy, which is a theory of teaching, which some of the year 7s have also been interested in, surprisingly enough. So how you, for example, how you teach causation in history, or how you think about change in history. So really deep, conceptually complex things, and open to all levels of the school. Okay, next slide, please. So student destinations. Many of our students go on to Rush Group universities, Exeter, for example, Bristol, and Oxbridge as well. As is often the assumption, and it is still correct, largely speaking, that history is seen as a good preparatory subject for other subjects. So into law, into politics, into philosophy and theology as well, actually, and into business, all are good avenues from history. And of course, you can always be a history teacher. Okay, next slide, please. Any questions?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Joyce. That was really informative. Obviously, you've talked about the breadth of the history course. Is there any sort of preparatory reading over the summer holidays that you would recommend students of history to do?
So, any reading is good reading, firstly. There are some key course texts that we suggest that pupils read. They're not assessed texts, so you don't have to read them, but it is very, very useful to. For example, Martin Sixsmith's Russia is a particularly good overview text. Starts all the way from the Rus, the founding tribal ethnic groups of Russia, all the way up to the communist period. Richard Service, also very good for that, for overview in Russia as well. Dominic Sandbrook's, he's written, I've written the name down because he's written about 14 books on this. Never Had It So Good overlaps very well with the British course, as does Andrew Marr's The Making of Modern Britain. Those are some of our key texts that we suggest reading. The beauty of how we are now is there's a huge amount of accessible content online as well, and on things like YouTube to give basis to and a bit of an introduction to our courses. But yes, I do strongly suggest reading is really beneficial, particularly doing it in the summer when pupils who are coming to year 12 have time to, they have other academic commitments or other cross-curricular commitments. Doing some reading to get yourself a really strong basis in the subject then is really sensible, and it does make a a marked difference and a quantifiable difference to outcomes, to grades. The more
Brilliant, thank you. Is that information, the books that you've mentioned, can prospective students find that on the history part of the sixth form?
Yes, it's
on the website.
Yes, and it also should be part of the sixth form handbook as well.
Lovely, thank you so much.
My pleasure, good to talk to you.
Thank you, and you. So we're now going to move on to modern foreign languages, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Green. Are you there?
Hello, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Over to you, please, Mr.
Lovely,
Green.
evening everybody. So yeah, as Sally said, I'm Andy Green, I'm Head of Languages, and everything I say this evening focuses around French, German and Spanish. They're the three languages that we offer at A-level. And as you can see, there are entry requirements are GCSE grade 7 in the relevant language. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So I just want to talk through the year 12 and 13 courses, starting with year 12. So after your GCSE in modern languages, which is largely talking about yourself, focusing on past, present and future tenses, you've come into your A-level class with your grade 7, 8 or 9. And this is sort of how we structure our year. So the first thing that we really focus on is your grammar. So we know that your grammar will be at GCSE level coming in. We're not expecting really complex grammar yet. So we'll gauge your ability in grammar really early. We'll take you through the transition into A-level grammar, into the more complex stuff, and we'll make sure that before we move on to more complex text and things, your grammar's at a standard that we're all happy with, and we've got good competency in that. Second thing I put on there is about understanding longer text. So we would expect our A-level students to be engaging with news items on a regular basis, websites, looking up articles on the topic areas that we study at A-level. The complexity of the text will increase, the formality will increase. So there is a rise in standard in terms of the text with which we're dealing, which then leads us into essay writing, which you'll start to write your first essays probably around January, February in year 12. So in the A-level specification, as we'll see on the next slide, we do film and book studies. And any essays that we write in French, Spanish or German will be based on the book and film. So any sort of techniques that you've got on writing about literature or film from English literature really feed in well into the modern languages course, because you're just writing about books, film, evidence, making your point, using your evidence and explaining, but we're just doing it now in a foreign language. And in terms of essays, you're looking at essays around 300 to 350 words. So it's not too daunting in terms of the amount that you have to write. It's just double the amount that you would write at GCSE. Speaking is obviously a focus as well. I'll talk about the exam later and what the percentage of that is speaking. But we look for opportunities in the classroom to get you speaking in French, Spanish and German, whether that's making presentations, whether that's debates, speed dating. Okay, we look at different classroom techniques to get speaking, and we're also blessed with a couple of volunteers who come in and do speaking in pairs with our students as well. So you get opportunities outside the classroom to speak in the foreign language. The last thing I put on there is about topic work. So the A-level, as you can see on the right hand side, our year 12 topics includes, and these are across all three languages, things like the modern family and how family has changed with the decline in religion, what's the impacts of that on birth rate, on views towards family, on the importance of staying in a family. Cyber society comes up in certainly the French and Spanish scheme of work. So what is France doing to make their country more literate in terms of how people use computers? Culture and heritage is a really popular topic. So looking at, for example, UNESCO sites in France and how that's protected, and how the intangible culture is also protected in France. Art and architecture, gender equality, volunteering, cinema. There's lots and lots of good variety of topics. I think the important thing is, the attractive thing about this course is that we're not talking about ourselves all the time now. We're taking interest in the country, in the people, in the politics, the history, society, and that just seems to be a more interesting thing to be talking about. Okay, next slide, please. So as we move into year 13, you can see there the topics go from being kind of social to being a bit more political. So immigration, integration, marginalisation, racism. In the German scheme of work, there's a big topic on the EU. In Spanish, there's monarchy and dictatorship. In French, there's crime and justice, and political movements generally. So these are quite complex topics. but again, really popular ones. So a lot of our students are doing history or politics as other A-levels, and so they can bring their expertise across, which is great in sort of seminar groups. Looking at the left-hand side there, so in year 13 in January, we'll do the mock exam, although there'll be lots of practice before that too. That'll be a full mock with the paper 1, paper 2 and the speaking. We look at more independent work, and you may be aware that students have access to supervised study sessions throughout their A-levels. We would expect students in their 1 hour of languages supervised study to be engaging with texts and podcasts and improving their language for themselves, making sure they're making use of that time. The topic work I've just been through there on the right hand side. And then we've got one of our most popular bits of the course, which is the independent research project. So in the speaking exam, an element of that is that pupils can choose an item of French, Spanish or German culture that they're particularly interested in. It can be quite niche, and they look at that from an analytical point of view and essentially become experts on it, teaching their examiner about the topic and answering questions related to it with a decent amount of analysis. I'm trying to think of a good example. So one of our students once did about the influence of the Colombian singer Bad Bunny. So that's really quite niche. Some did about the impact and legacy of France winning the 1998 World Cup. So they can be really things that are of interest to that specific student, as long as there's some analysis involved. Sort of anything's fair game, really. And then the exam eventually. So that is made of 3 papers. A paper 1, which is listening, reading and translation, which is worth 50% of the overall mark. The speaking exam, which involves a picture card and discussion, and the independent research project that I just mentioned, which is worth 30%. And then the writing paper, which is 2 essays, 1 on a book and 1 on a film, which is worth 20%. Next slide, please. So key highlights are kind of nice little gallery there for you. So we've got some of the films and books that we study. So the French film there, La Haine, it's quite a gritty black and white film, really popular with our students. The Spanish film, where we've changed our film this year, so we're going to study Pan's Labyrinth, which is kind of half surrealist and half kind of historical and political. It's really interesting. A lot of symbolism in there. The German film, that's Leben der Anderen, it's kind of more a war-based film. And then we've got our literature as well. So we've got the French novel Un Sac de Billes, the German play Andorra, and the Spanish play La Casa de Bernarda Alba. And the films are usually studied in year 12, and the literature generally in year 13. I think the German start there is in year 12. Now, I've tried to put some other pictures in there just so you can get a flavour of some group work going on there. My year 13 class enjoying themselves. We've got the winners of our vocab competition lining up with their Easter eggs. We've got the food picture in the top corner there relates to the projects that we do with Godolphin School, where we get our A-level students together and discuss film and culture. And then the top right is a hint to the next slide, really, which is a picture on our trip. So if you go to the next slide, oh, those pictures are small, aren't they? We've got there some pictures from our trip last year to Andalusia. This was a trip for year 11, 12 and 13 students. We took 15 of them out to Andalusia and did a bit of a road trip. It was a bit of a dream for me. It's a road trip I'd always wanted to do. So we went to Granada, Cordoba and Sevilla. And you can see that we had a cookery class. We had a walking tour around Sevilla, guided tour. We went to a flamenco show. We went to the Mezquita de Cordoba. Really amazing trip. Great memories and loads of opportunities for students to learn about the culture, history of that area and speak some Spanish. In December this year, we're heading out to Lille and Brussels on the Eurostar, so taking 11 year 13s out there for 4 days into the Christmas holidays, so where we'll have some language classes, we'll do some cultural visits, and we will visit the Christmas markets and make the most of those. I think we've got a waffle cooking class in there as well, which will be nice. At the bottom there, you can barely see it, but it says Welcome to King's. So we had a student who was runner-up in a national essay writing competition and we took a few out there to King's College London to go and collect his prize. We also had a student who won the University of Sheffield translation competition for Spanish last year as well. So we look for opportunities to test our linguists outside of the classroom too. And I think final slide. Student destinations, yeah. So We have a lot of students who go on to do languages, whether it's an entirely modern languages degree. Sometimes we have people that go on and do 2 languages. But also what's nice is students want to, if they're going to go and do politics or going to go and do law, quite often if they've done a language at A level, they'll pair up with that. So politics and Spanish, or law and Spanish. We've had a couple of those recently, as well as our students have gone away to be dual linguists at Exeter, Bristol, Cardiff. But students go and do work experience, so work as an au pair for a year in France, for example, last year, which was really cool. Students who join the army, I know they've said that the army really value the languages as well, and that was a big plus for those. And you can see a few photos there, which I've got of former students who are on their travels, wandering the Camino de Santiago there. One's playing basketball in Brazil on his year abroad. We've got a racing driver in Barcelona. We've got a boy doing some traveling around South America. All of those actually have got stories on BWS MFL, our Instagram page. So if you want to have a look at their story, there's pinned posts on there, so you can have a look at what our students have been up to since leaving the MFL classroom. I think it's my time for some questions. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
What sort of numbers of students do you have in the class?
So it's been a steady rise actually. So in year 13 at the moment, we've got 15 doing French, which is really, really good. This is as many as we've had since I've been at school. I'd say we tend to average out around 8, 9, 10, which is a really nice number in that we can get to know students' individual abilities really, really well and really quickly, and obviously differentiate our learning, put intervention in place for specific students based on that. So we get to know our students really well, we get to know their strengths and weaknesses really well, and prepare them therefore for the exams really well too.
Could you talk a little bit about your team? Because I've always been struck by how many specialists you actually do have.
Yeah, so in terms of teaching A level, it's been nice for me to have a little year off this year, which is in year 12. So we've got such a good team now that we've got Mrs. Dewar and Mrs. Martin teaching the year 12 Spanish course. Myself and Miss Martin do the year 13, and then we've got Mademoiselle Bedard and myself teach the year 13 French, and Mademoiselle Bedard and Miss Telford teach the year 12 French. So yeah, really good, really strong team. Yeah, a settled team, really ambitious, and all really enjoy teaching the A level. It's a great chance for a linguist to test their skills, isn't it, at A level? So yeah, good team.
Most definitely. And do you have any students who take more than one language?
Yeah, so currently we've got 3 dual linguists in the A level system, and last year we had a student who left who had been doing all 3. So we had someone who did French, Spanish and German. That's quite unusual to do all 3, but you know, we'll accommodate it for sure. And yeah, dual linguists are fairly common. It's good, especially the French and Spanish, I'd say, is the most natural combination. It seems to go hand in hand really well. But yes, if anyone wants to do 2 languages, then definitely do so.
And of course, opening these individual 3 languages open up the opportunity to even pick up new ones at university, don't they?
Yeah, I believe one of our students who did French A level last year has gone on to do beginners Italian at Oxford, I think, alongside her other subject. So yes, definitely, it opens the doors to other languages for sure. Yeah,
and we've had in the past a student who did Spanish with you who went on to do a beginner's Czech at Oxford. That's and right. Yeah. Now is working on some research papers with the department because he's done so well, which is amazing. Really good news. Yeah, so thank you very much indeed, Mr. Green, for that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm now going to introduce Mr. Edney. He has a lot to talk about because music is a huge department within Bishops, not only because of the A level, but also because of the extracurricular and co-curricular opportunities there are to get involved with music at Bishops. Mr. Edney, are you there, please?
Unmute. Good evening. Yes, I'm here.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Armstrong. Sorry, I've just lost the page where I can see where the slides are. Give me 1 second. I do apologise. There we go. Yeah, great. So my name's Mr. Edney, and I'm Director of Music at Bishops. and so for A-level music, we actually run AS music and A-level side by side in year 12, and we do say that grades 6 to 7 is what's required by the time you get to the end of year 13. But at the moment, if you're an instrumentalist, then certainly grade 4 to 5 would be helpful, and we do ask for a grade 7 in music just because of this step in score reading and analysing. When we get into A level, there's quite a large jump from GCSE to A level. So next slide, please. So this is our year 12. And I am just going to talk predominantly about syllabus at the moment. So in year 12, our first area of study is the Western classical tradition, which is the development of the symphony. As I said, we teach AS and A level side by side. The two syllabuses are identical for year 12. So that's from 1750 to 1870. That's sort of Stamets and the Mannheim School all the way up to early Beethoven. Our set work is the Haydn Symphony 104. For AS, we only study movements 1 and 2. And then our other area of study is jazz. There are other options, but we do tend to, so far, that we voted towards jazz. There are options of doing music theatre and rock and pop, but the classes over the last few years have chosen jazz. So that's what we're studying at the moment. For those in year 12 that do their AS at the end of the year, you have a performance exam of 4 to 6 minutes. It's equivalent to grade 5, and that is done by an external visiting examiner. We have nothing to do with that. And then, just as you do in GCSE, there's 2 compositions. As you see, I've put there for A-level students, we do expect the free composition to be basically done by the end of year 12, and that's the deadline there as well. Next slide, please. And then year 13 is basically then just the parts that we didn't cover in year 12. So area study A just goes on to 1900. So looking through Beethoven and Brahms, early Tchaikovsky. We cover movements 3 and 4 of the Haydn. And we look at the essay, the development of the symphony essay, which isn't on the AS paper, that's only on the A-level paper. And then we have another decade of jazz to look at. So that's sort of cool jazz, Birth of the Cool, Miles Davis, that sort of area. And we also have into the 20th century is our other area of study for a full A-level, where we look at serialism, impressionism, and those are our 2 set works, Debussy and Poulenc. Free and set brief compositions. A set brief composition has to be in the style of a Western classical tradition composition, so almost Haydn pastiche. And we are EDUCAS board, and there are certain rules that need to be followed. So it's almost as if you have to imagine you've been commissioned to write a piece of music in the style of Mozart or Haydn. The exam for the performance exam is equivalent to grade 6. So for both those exams, it's exactly like the GCSE. If you are the grade above, so in this case, if you were playing grade 7 pieces, you would get extra marks for difficulty level. You can play grade 5 pieces, but you would lose some marks. It's exactly the same as GCSE. Next slide, please. So the key highlights, I always like to use this slide. This was a slide given to me by an ex-headmaster of Eton, actually, who after he left Eton, he was commissioned to work with some sort of global huge companies, and they were doing brainstorming for what they were looking for in apprentices and graduates, and this is the language that came out of those brainstorms. And he actually stopped for a moment and said, these are musicians. So this is why I like to show this slide. This is what doing A-level music and music in general gives you. It gives you all of these characteristics and all of these skills. It's why I believe that A-level music is an amazing subject, and it gives you a slightly different outlook, I believe. So this is what I believe doing A-level music gives you in terms of a skill set. Next slide, thank you. So the other side of our department, the second music department, basically, outside of the curriculum, obviously those that do A-level music are encouraged wholeheartedly to be involved in everything we do outside of the classroom. Being in an ensemble is hugely important if you're an instrumentalist. It gives you, you know, so much contact time and practice and involvement with music that is really imperative for when you're thinking about going and doing your solo performance at the end of whether you're doing AS or A-level music. But for those of you that are here and not thinking about A-level music, but are instrumentalists or musicians, this, you know, I'm possibly reaching out to you here as well. So we've got a school orchestra and a big band. There's 3 choirs. That's the main school choir, which currently stands at 69. There's someone else has just joined us. There's an audition chamber choir. That's for more advanced singers. We get through repertoire very quickly, and it's difficult repertoire as well. 2 brass ensembles. We've got a beginner brass, and then we've got a senior brass that accompany all of the hymns and cathedral services. There's a new wind ensemble, and we also run theory and production clubs as well. So we have an incredibly busy co-curricular program, and that's all on our Instagram page as well. So BWS Music DEP, DEPT. Trips and excursions. We went to Prague in 2023. We've just finalised the details for going to Ypres in 2025, where we will be performing at the Menin Gate as part of the Remembrance Service. That has been confirmed, Mrs. Armstrong. And then we have regular trips to go and see symphony orchestra concerts. We try and get down to Bournemouth at least twice a year. I have plans to go up to London in the next year or so, and that is of particular interest to A-level students, because I really want to be able to go and see the 104 for the Haydn 104 at least once during the 2-year course. The last year there hasn't been one local to us, so I'm planning on going up to the festival to see that in 2025. We go to St Peter's College in Oxford every year with the chamber choir to experience what it is to be a choral or an organ scholar at an Oxbridge college. And then we regularly give evensongs with both choirs, and those are some of the cathedrals that we've been to over the last few years, and we have been invited to sing at St Paul's in 2025, which is that's an audition process, and there's not very many state schools can say that they've given evensong at St Paul's, so that's something that we're incredibly proud of. It's busy, so some of our pupils are incredibly busy with the music that they do during the week, but I think they enjoy it because they come back every day, pretty much every day, some of them. So we're very proud of what we do outside of the classroom at Bishop's. Next slide, please. And then destinations. So we have pupils that go off to do performance at music colleges and then off to universities as well. So we've got alumni at Guildhall and Royal Birmingham Conservatoire specifically doing music performance. And then we've got past organists and choir members with choral and with scholarships to Oxbridge and Durham University. And then 2 years ago, one of our pupils went to Royal Holloway to study film composition as well. So the pupils that come out of Bishop's go off to various different avenues to continue their music. And that is specifically as music. There's dozens that have gone off that I know that still continue to do their music in university orchestras or singing local church choirs. So I believe that we set pupils up to continue that love of music once they leave us. I think that's me done until questions.
Okay, thank you. I really liked the skill set that you put up. I thought that was really, really interesting. Do universities value music as one of a portfolio of A-levels? So if you were doing medicine, for example, you had chemistry, biology and music. Would that be accepted and appreciated?
Yeah, very much so by all universities. It's that belief of the skills that the pupils leave sixth form with if they're studying music, because I did mention it that I do believe it just gives you a slightly different approach to the way that you look at things and the way that you study things. Those that do A-level music, and universities do love pupils that have got that as their fourth or possibly their half with the AS music option that we offer at Bishops as well. So yes, is the short answer to that.
Lovely, thank you very much, and excellent news about Meningate. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move on, and we are going to go over to Mr. Stamp, in our head of our politics society. Politics department.
Hello, Sally.
Hello there. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Always nice to speak to you.
Good. If you could talk to us about the A-level, but also definitely mention the excellent politics society that you have, please.
Oh, I will do. I can't see the slides in front of me. I assume you can see them, but I remember what's on them. Okay. So the politics course that we cover at Bishops is the Pearson-led Excel A-level course, and it's a comparative course. So it takes in content from the UK and the US. For year 12, the spec that we cover is the UK side, and we start with UK politics. So we look at democracy and participation, electoral systems, parties, and also voter behaviour in the media, previous elections. In the second component for year 12, it covers UK government, so constitution, the executive, so Prime Minister, Parliament, and relationship between the branches as well. So a little bit on Supreme Court, our relationship with the EU, and so forth. Both of those are examined in the same way. There's a paper for component 1 and component 2, and from each one of those you answer a source-based question and an essay-based question. They're both long-form answers, so 45-minute essays that you're writing in exam conditions. Towards the end of year 12, we pick up some political ideologies, and the core ideologies are conservatism, liberalism, and socialism. Some of those are picked up at the beginning of year 13 as well. And unlike the other components, these are far more based on political theory. We look at some of the key thinkers in those different ideologies, and for those ones, you don't need to have such up-to-date current affairs knowledge. It's really focusing on those core ideas of different political theorists. When we move into year 13, for the year 13th part of the course, that's really all focused on, there's one more ideology on feminism for the non-core section of the course, and then the rest of year 13 is all focused on US politics, which is particularly exciting at the moment. The year 13 has just started with the US Constitution, so we're working our way through that bit at the moment, which has lots of relevant parts for the election coming up, and they're all very aware of the election as well. Then there's components are again from the US side, because it's a comparative course. You look at the Congress, the executive and president federal system, and the Supreme Court, and also the different electoral systems and how you elect a president, amongst other things. So it's a really, really fun course to teach through, particularly the comparative component as well. Students often have quite a good understanding of British politics. They don't need to from the start, but they often have that basis and that understanding, which is what has drawn them to it. And the US in particular is a really exciting part of the course, because you're able to look at it with a little bit of distance, but also compare it to our side of the course as well. And it's very exciting to study and to teach, actually, because it is always up to date, and it's always there's always things going on, sometimes too much going on for the last few years. So it's really fun to teach. It means its course is currently always up to date, and just need to keep abreast of current affairs, which is really exciting. Okay, I still can't see the slides, but I think the next bit was the
key highlights.
The highlights. Oh,
events,
yes,
dear boy, events.
The highlights. I put events, dear boy, events because like that is for me, that's really the highlight, and actually for a lot of students as well. There's always something that we can link to the lessons that we're studying. So I remember 2 years ago there was we were doing parliamentary committees, which can be quite a dry subject if you're looking at just from the textbooks, but in the 2 weeks that we were studying it, Boris Johnson was up in front of the Standards Committee, and Rishi Sunak was in front of the liaison committee. So So there's always something there to catch on, which is a double-edged sword. It makes it very exciting, but it also means you need to keep up with things as well. But yeah, the last since 2019 and earlier, it's just been events and events and events, and they've all been really interesting and engaging to come along with. Even up to the recent dress gate with Keir Starmer and expensive apparel and things like that. So there's always things to keep abreast of. And actually, that's one of the things that is worthwhile keeping in mind if you're thinking about choosing politics, is that you really do need to keep abreast of current affairs. There's lots of ways of doing that. I listen to tons and tons of podcasts on double speed to get through as many as I can. But Miss Anders used to religiously watch Channel 4 News every night. So as long as you're keeping abreast of these things, because you need to use them in your essays to keep them up to date. And it's just very, very good fun and really interesting seeing how things are going. So events really is a really nice highlight, because that keeps it very current. In addition to that, a few things, recent highlights for me, just in teaching it, is that with the year 13s, just to finish off their ideologies one, we had a nice socialist dinner party where we invited all of these different socialists that they had met through their key thinkers, and we worked out where they were going to sit, who would they get on with, made a nice socialist playlist as well, just to explore those deeper themes within socialism, whether they'd all agree that each was socialist and so forth. So that was really fun to teach with the year 13s, and the year 12s are just in the midst. Again, availability bias. I'm choosing something to highlight that we're doing at the moment. The year 12s are currently running an election across the school using different electoral systems to see what the outcomes would be. And for this one, I've done pizzas in the past, but for this one, we are choosing tracks. So the year 12s have selected tracks to stand in each constituency, and the tracks are candidates, MPs. The music genre is the party, and the album or the mixtape, if you're my age, that they're creating will be the government and the parliament, and we'll see if I assume pop or rock might make a majority under first past the post, but the proportional systems will end up with some sort of coalition. So those are recent highlights for me. I've just really enjoyed teaching it, and we'll see how things go there. Yeah.
Okay, so co-curricular activities and trips, please. We've got a question actually in the Q&A about planned trips, so if you could talk through that'd be great.
There's always planned trip to Parliament, which is wonderful. It's a really nice day trip to go up to Parliament and get a fantastic tour around. The education department there is really, really well run, very slick. They run a really nice course as well, and often we'll get to speak to John Glenn if he's there, or sometimes we've had Lords as well to come over and speak to as well. So the trip to Parliament is fab. In addition to these, the Politics Society runs really regular speakers, and we've had tons and tons from Ian Duncan Smith was last year, and we've had university lecturers come along to speak as well from Southampton and other places. A few years ago we had campaign manager for a US Senate and presidential run spoke to us as well. John Glenn will often come in to speak to us as well, and yeah, it's a really, really nice way of students taking control of some of the things that people they'd like to come and hear from. The Politics Society also are running events. We're going to have an election breakfast for the US presidential election just after half term. They also ran the largest hustings before for the 2024 UK general election just in the summer, and two of the Politics Society members chaired that. Everyone organised it. It was a huge success, not least because nobody fell off the stage. But yeah, they're really, really active. It's wonderful to see how engaged they are. There's often talks at Arundel's as well that we're invited to and head along there, and we saw Theresa May last year came along to speak to us there, and several of the politics students got to go and ask her questions as well. So lots of engaging extracurricular things to go along as well.
So do you think that there will be a trip abroad perhaps in the future? Would you like to go back to Washington at some point?
Perhaps. I know they have in the past, and it would be a really fun place to go to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So on to student destinations.
So we've had actually this year, when I particularly when at prize giving, when I looked through the list of students at the end of the booklet, I was reminded how many have chosen to go on to do politics or PPE or international relations or politics and history be on there. So we have lots of students who go on to Russell Group universities and others to continue studying politics. And we also have students who will go on to study other topics. I had a really nice email from a student just as I logged on today, who's just gone to Oxford to study medicine, and he said he had spoken to William Hague whilst he was walking around for about 10 minutes. So there's lots of students go on to university to study politics and others. In terms of jobs as well, there's lots of previous politics students in journalism, in international organisations as well, in the civil service. So there's plenty who are making the most of what they picked up and learned in the politics course.
Absolutely. Okay. Actually, you might not be aware of this, but I had a former student come in and see me last week who absolutely loved politics, went off to New York University in Abu Dhabi and majored in politics. And now his dream has come through. He's actually working for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Wonderful. So he came back and was raving about politics and having studied it at A-level. But as far as questions go, of course, this is a new subject for students. They've never studied it before. Mm-hmm. They may have done a little bit in history, perhaps, but how would they go about knowing that politics was the right subject for them to take?
It is a written assessed topic, so all of the assessments are essay based. So you should at least acknowledge that you're going into a subject where you are going to do long form writing, and we can support you to do that, but you should know that that's the case. In terms of whether the topic is for you, I think the best heuristic for that is when the news is on, do you turn it off or do you keep it on and follow up? Because that really is a key important thing. So you do need to keep up with current affairs, and so if you are interested in what is happening and you're attuned to that, that's probably a good indication. There's a few good things that have been on recently. Last year, or might be last year, a little bit longer than that, Lauren Koonsberg's documentary State of Chaos was on BBC iPlayer, and it was 3 episodes on Johnson, actually on May, Johnson and Truss, and that gives a really good overview of the last 4 or 5 years in British politics. If you make your way through all of that and you want to know more, that's a really good indication. If you're listening to regular news podcasts like Newscast or Americast or things like that, that's also a really good indication. If you are turning off, it's probably a good indication that maybe politics isn't for you. But if you're tuning in, that's a good indication.
Lovely, thank you. And can we finally have a hot tip for who's going to win the US election?
Oh my gosh, it's so horribly tight. It's going to come down to a few 10,000 votes in one of 6 swing states. Pennsylvania seems like the tipping point state because it's worth the most electoral college votes and the way that they line up. If you line up whether they're most likely to go Democrat or not, but if you look at the polling for Pennsylvania, it's within the margin of error. So it's a coin toss at the moment. I think wait till 5 days before the election, see what the polls are in Pennsylvania, and then maybe make your decision then, because it is so close. Amazingly, yeah.
Very exciting.
Not a great answer, but there we are.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That was great.
Always nice to speak to you, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd now like to introduce Mrs. Kaur. She is head of department in RS, which most students tend to think about as philosophy, ethics and theology. Mrs. Kaur, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Lovely. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, welcome. My name's Mrs. Kaur and I'm one of the 2 teachers that teach the A-level. So it's co-taught with my colleague, Dr. Wood. She teaches the developments in Christian thought, otherwise known as theology. I teach the ethics component, and the philosophy of religion component is taught by both of us. So basically, we feel it works really well that way because we're teaching to our strengths, and obviously the students get a change as well. First slide, please. So starting with year 12, some of the questions that we ask, and they all do tend to be very much like questions, given that we're talking about philosophy here and we're talking about ethics here. So we start by asking about questions like, how do we know what is right? Where does the sense of right and wrong come from? Can it ever be defined? We try and talk about various philosophies that will shape the way in which we've come to various conclusions about what is right, and we will examine 4 different theories from famous philosophers such as Joseph Fletcher, John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, Immanuel Kant. So there's quite a lot of philosophers with various theories that we will allude to. And obviously, as in year 12, we want students to get a grasp of what scholars think and how they thought, what were they influenced by, because some of the philosophers were influenced by some of the very ancient Greek philosophers that we've all heard of, like Aristotle and Socrates and so on and so forth. Obviously, in the theology element, how can we know that God exists? So we will look at various theories, which some students may have come across at GCSE at a very sort of a lower level, like cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and so forth. And then there's some more sort of piercing questions about how do we know what is real? You know, is everything an illusion? Are we really living the life we're living? And various theories that have been developed around that from people like Jean-Paul Sartre, for example. And then on the theology element, you've also got questions like, who was Jesus of Nazareth? You know, exactly what was he trying to get across? Some of the ethics, some of the teaching, some of the dogma, some of so many of those elements that make Christianity what it is now, so that we can do some compare and contrast and sort of delve much deeper into those teachings. And then obviously lastly, the developing beliefs about heaven and hell, and how thinking has kind of like changed over time from what it was and what Christian thought is now, and those modern developments. And again, we encourage our students to access various scholars to inform their judgments and critically analyse. Going on to year 13, next slide please. In year 13, we become a bit more evaluative, a bit more critical, and we start looking at things like pluralism and can all religions be true? You know, how do we cope with this idea of different religious ideas to perhaps achieve a different end or even the same end? Gender and religious belief is a relatively new unit in as much as it's the course is now trying to capture some of the more modern developments in thinking and some of the more modern issues about things like gender, for example. The next one is, how do we use human language? So in the context of human language, there are so many different ethical theories and ways in which we express ourselves. Sometimes it comes from intuition, sometimes it comes from your emotions. So those sorts of things are explored in terms of the language we use, particularly in a religious context, but also in non-religious context, to understand belief systems. Sexual ethics is also something that we explore in more detail, simply to try and get across, again, very similar to the gender and religious belief, the idea that where do those ethics come from? What are they rooted in? What about the changes that are happening in society in terms of our expression, our understanding and our interpretation of the various sort of permutations around the ethics relating to sexual ethics and, you know, sexuality as it were. Ethical theories about conscience have always probably been on most philosophy courses, to be honest with you. Things like situation ethics, and where we have to access this thing called conscience. What is it? How does it inform us? Does it exist? And various scholars and they're talking around it. The liberation theology and Marx comes in, and I can see the link here with perhaps with history and various other courses here as well. the liberation theology, the idea that the church should bring about social change. So it's not just rooted in the past. We're looking at now, current events, things that are happening in society today, and draw on ideas from Marx and how that may have influenced liberation theology and those ideas. So essentially, the course, what we're trying to do in this course is to develop students' interests. We want them to relate them to the wider world. It's not just about historical scholars and the past, as a lot of our scholars are alive and well and still lecturing in various environments. We want our students to appreciate the contribution of these scholars and the philosophers, past and present. And I think what's also quite important for us on this course is that we want our students to develop their own thoughts, often about topics they've probably never really given much thought to. So try and be critical, try and learn how to analytically sort of analyze and evaluate. And we do feel quite strongly that these are very readily transferable skills into other subjects and beyond. Next slide. Right. Use of Sarum College, just down the road, literally just a few yards, 200 yards it says there, 200 yards from the school. We're the only school, Bishops is actually the only school that actually has this arrangement with the college. And the beauty of that is the boys can, the students can go there and use the college, become members of the college, use their other facilities, and in particular study rooms. So when we set work like discussions and debates and preparation for that kind of thing, our students can go in their groups and they can go over to the college, especially if they don't want to do it at school or they want to do it somewhere else, and they can sit in some of these little rooms that are available there at the college, not to mention the whole host of textbooks that are available there in the library. I mean, it really is a gem, and like I said, literally yards away from our school. We try and get visiting scholars in. We've had various speakers on pluralism, interfaith talks and that type of thing. We've had genetics, scholars on genetics, which obviously links to a certain degree with various topics that we do on this course, the legacy of the church and same-sex relationships. So it's a mixed bag in terms of the types of scholars that we feel lend themselves to our course. This term, I did have the paperwork here somewhere. This term we are in collaboration with the Medical Society, and we've got a professor in epigenetics to explore life before birth, combining medical, theological and philosophical perspectives. It's a mouthful, but it really is a very interesting area which has very close links with philosophy in terms of the mind, the soul, when does life begin, and just looking at something like epigenetics from various perspectives really. And obviously where we have an interest is can our genes actually be influenced by our environment? How do they change? How can they change? And how much of an influencing factor is the environment on that? So quite a lot of different types of things that we've engaged with. Next slide, please. Okay, co-curricular activities. We have a special arrangement with Exeter University's Theology and Religion Department, so much so that this week on Friday we're taking all our Year 12s and our 13s to Exeter University, and we're going to get a couple of talks from, sorry, I have to look at my piece of paper here, Professor Ludlow, who's a Professor of Christian History and Theology, and then Professor Susanna Cornwell, who is the Director of the Exeter Centre for Ethics and Practical Theology. So we try and tap into our contacts and other sources to make sure that our students get something in Year 12 and something in Year 13. Obviously, we've got the visit to Sarum College to see the remarkable St. John's Bible, the first handwritten, illuminated Bible in 500 years. So that's quite a big deal to be able to view that. We've also our philosophy prefects will run and shape and lead the BWS Philosophy Society. So we've got a Philosophy Society running, which is open to all years, and so many of our students who've been actively involved in that, and sometimes not even the prefects, it could be any member of our philosophy class, they have actually found it very useful to have learnt something in class and then to be able to teach that to younger students and get their viewpoints and so on and so forth. And they find that quite useful to be able to put it into words to consolidate their own learning. So that's quite a nice opportunity for individuals to get involved in as well, or just simply attend, you know, just go to the Philosophy Society. You don't actually have to be actively involved, so it's quite useful. And one of the things that we've done in the past, and we're keeping our eye open for this year as well, for this academic year, is to go to the Candle conferences, which, and it's the Peter Vardy one that we like going to. He's a British ethicist, completely alive and well. And what's really good about that particular conference is that you will get students from other grammar schools, from Kes in Birmingham and places like that. And he encourages open debate in these conferences and open discussion. So, and we know our students like that. They can see other like-minded students on the same course. I feel they get a lot out of it. So that's that. I think next slide. Right, this is just the 2024 cohort that I've put here, which is the students that went on to study just pure theology or theology with philosophy, yeah, and or just philosophy. Basically, we've got King's College there, Cambridge, King's College London, and Exeter University. That does not take into consideration those students that have probably gone off, that have gone off to do some other combination of different degrees. But this is just our cohort of last year, about 22 students. So we had 3 students who went off to do a combination of philosophy and theology. Usually most years we will get, you know, between 3 and 5 students, 3 to 4 students that will go in that direction. And are we nearly at the end? Oh, yes. Thank you. Is that okay?
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Could I just pick up on your last point a little bit? You obviously outlined the 2024 cohort who moved into higher education to do theology and philosophy, but what other career paths have you noticed students doing in the past that have taken philosophy? What do they go on and do?
The one I've seen probably the most popular is PPE. So philosophy, politics and economics. That seems to be quite a popular degree, again, in the Russell Group universities. So that's one. And the other ones can vary quite widely, in fact, from law, psychology, some of the other humanities like geography and history, degrees. It lent itself to that. And we've even had students who have picked very STEM subjects that pick the A-level philosophy course to do because they want to develop their critical writing. They want to be able to evaluate and think critically, and they feel that our subject lends itself to that and combines, you know, and combines and contrasts, I guess, with the other subjects they're doing. I mean, I think in this year's cohort, we've got a girl who's doing maths, further maths, something else, you know, and then suddenly RS and philosophy. So it's good to see. Good to see.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. That was great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And finally, this evening, Mr. Kerr.
Good evening.
Good evening. You're going to talk us through both business and economics this evening. Yep. Great. Over to you.
Welcome. So my name is Andy Kerr, head of business and economics. obviously saving the best till last. We cover A-level business and economics using Edexcel, and in year 12 what we do and what Edexcel does is splits the course by breaking businesses up into their functional components. And so you might be familiar and may work in marketing, HR, finance, operations yourself. And so what Edexcel have done is neatly divided them into themes 1 and 2 for year 12. And so in theme 1 we have a dedicated teacher focused on theme 1, looking at marketing and people, and in theme 2 we look at finance, so things like cash flow forecasts, profit and loss statements, and then also look at operations management, production, productive capacity, and of course the impacts of the external environment. And no doubt everyone who's listening has probably felt the impacts of inflation over the last couple of years. Next slide, if I may. And so in year 13 we build upon what's happening or what we covered in year 12, and we look at strategic management in theme 3. And then we take what we've learned in marketing to the global stage. And so in terms of what we cover in theme 3, assessment of competitive environment, we go further with financial statements, looking at ratios, balance sheets, but all the while, and what comes across throughout the course is this idea of business context. And so what this A-level really requires is the ability to understand the content, whether it be themes 1, 2, 3, or 4, but bring it all together and apply it to a specific business situation. And in fact, if you've ever seen a Harvard Business Review case study, the A-level is based upon that premise, where pupils are expected to be able to look at a situation in real world context. And Edexcel do a great job of bringing global brands to the exam paper with Spotify, Apple, Nokia, Microsoft, and then ask questions about strategic position, the impacts of ethics, corporate social responsibility, and how that's going to have an impact. And finally, then in the third paper, which they refer to as the synoptic paper, there is a focus on a specific industry. And in the past, we've looked at the global health and fitness industry. We've looked at the global chocolate industry. And so the whole paper is dedicated to looking at a specific market, if you will, on a global scale. And so if we go to the next slide, in terms of its role in terms of finding future employment, but also studying at university, I've got some slides here from the IFS on the right and the World Economic Forum on the left. And you can see that I put arrows next to all of the subjects and topics that we cover within the A-level in business. And so finance, accounting, administration, there's economics as well, so the external environment, and then marketing as well. And so it's one of the more popularly studied subjects at university. And on the right hand side we can see that economics is amongst the most popularly sought after degrees, and business is a wee bit further up next to law and physical sciences. So in terms of co-curricular activities and trips, because of the dynamic nature of the subjects, what I've found is a lot of trips that we've taken pupils on in the past don't really deliver in terms of stretching the subject content far enough. And so what we decided to do over the last 3 or 4 years is actually invite people in via Teams and Zoom and online calls. And We've had some fantastic talks with former bishops' pupils, one of which is a senior economist working for a government regulator in electricity. We've had the Bank of England visit us virtually on 2 occasions. But we've also got the Economics and Business Education Association, and they run fantastic conferences online that we can plug into and listen. And then last year, the Oxford High School have a student-led conference, and in terms of proximity, they're perfectly placed in terms of getting hold of key professors at the Said Business School at Oxford University. And they seem to be able to invite them onto these calls, and these bring a lot of the topical issues that are happening in the world of business and economics to the pupils at Bishops. What we also do is very much try and create a virtual learning environment where both myself and the other member of the department will post important and current trends and topics and events in the world of business and economics as well. So we encourage the pupils to watch videos, listen to podcasts, but also listen to up-to-date articles as well. And that seems to be working quite well. There's a stretch and challenge area where those who are looking to go to top universities would want to do extra reading and listening as well. And then if I could go to the next slide, in terms of student destinations, I mean, outside of STEM subjects, we are in terms of economics, business, I mean, any degree with business, finance, management, economics, a significant proportion of the leavers of the school end up going on to study across both or one of the subjects. And nationally, both of the subjects are growing. And if I could just any questions?
Shall we wait for questions to the end of the next section?
Should we go straight on to economics?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that without any problem. So economics, again, we're with edXL, and again, they use themes 1 to 4, and theme 1, and the study of economics is really divided into 2 key broad areas. We look at individual markets and market failure, and that's also known as microeconomics. And then we look at whole economies, the performance and policies used at government level to manage economies, and that's called macroeconomics. And so that really splits the study of the subject in 2. And so in theme 1 in year 12, we're looking at individual markets, how they work, and obviously, because it is economics, how they don't work. And then obviously that is going to lead to the government intervening in that market and what impacts the government may have and whether those impacts and objectives are met. Theme 2 is very much focused on the whole of the UK economy. So we begin that part of the course by looking at the key economics performance indicators like unemployment, inflation, economic growth, and then we look at what governments may do to try and achieve the objectives of 2% inflation, 3% economic growth, and broader equality across the economy. Now, towards the end of year 12 in the summer term, if we can go on to the next slide, we begin theme 3 in the summer term. And for those who have, perhaps studied economics elsewhere, edXL calls it business economics, which actually I prefer. But essentially what we're studying here is the theory of the firm. And so we build upon what we learned in microeconomics earlier in the year, and we look at the nature of business as an economist. So we break down into costs, revenue, profits. We look at market structures, such as monopolies, duopolies, and oligopolies. And then what we also do is tie the final component of microeconomics by applying it to labour markets. And again, we look at the role of government intervening in markets. So at the moment, we know Google is very much under the spotlight for its monopoly power. And then building upon theme 2 and macroeconomics, we take that into global economics, looking at trade theory, comparative advantage. And we go back to the simpler macroeconomic policies from year 12 and apply them on a global scale. And then finally, what we do is we look at development economics. And there is overlap here with an A-level in geography. And again, I've got the same slides here. So, I'll go through these quite quickly for those people who have hung on to both subjects here. But ultimately, economics is a very well sought after degree. If you do a degree in straight economics, it ends up becoming an applied mathematics course. And so we're currently living in the world of data and data analysis, and you are very well equipped to go and work for a whole host of different companies, organizations, institutions to figure out what they're going to do with all of this data. Again, this is a repeat, so I'll go very, very quickly. What we're ultimately trying to do is to stretch and challenge, some bright individuals here. So in terms of cost, benefit, and time and disruption to the course, we prefer to beam people in and have them talk to them. And again, we encourage the use of podcasts, videos, books, and wider reading. And then finally, you've already seen this if you were here for business, that it's a popular destination, whether it be straight economics, business and finance, economics and finance, and it continues to grow. So should we take a moment now to field some questions?
Could you just finish off with the student destinations, and then I'll fire some questions off.
Right. So yeah. So in terms of student destinations, I think a significant proportion of leavers, whether they study economics or business, end up studying a degree or go on to some form of degree apprenticeships. Like the last 5 years we've had JP Morgan, PwC, Ernst & Young. A lot of it is very much focused on business, finance, and economics.
Indeed. You've got these 2 subjects, obviously. If a student wanted to choose one, how would they go about differentiating? Obviously, I've heard exactly what you said. One's much more data orientated, but what tips could you give to a student who wasn't quite sure which to choose, which would suit them better?
I'm often asked whether business is a softer option. My typical answer to that is that economics is definitely more academically rigorous, and I say this on a number of occasions because we've had a few disappointments in the past. But if you want to go on and study economics at university and you want your degree certificate to simply say economics on that certificate, then you need a very high grade in mathematics at A-level. And so you should take that into account. The other way I explain the difference between the two is that if you like more conceptual, theoretical study, and so if you prefer chemistry rather than biology, then economics is more like chemistry and business is more like biology. And so, in chemistry, a mole is something that they seem to talk about quite frequently, but I've never seen one. But if you study biology, then you can see a mole, right? So whilst both subjects are living and breathing and are very dynamic and are changing on a daily basis, we do have more conceptual frameworks in economics. And so, I definitely say that if you are more mathematical and, the biology and chemistry test is a good one.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Is it possible to take both of these subjects?
It is. This is not a popular choice, but we currently have one person in year 12. So before people make that decision, I do like to talk to them in advance, because it does narrow down your choices in life beyond bishops. But if you're very, very determined to go and do a degree in business and finance, then A levels in maths, economics and business are definitely going to help you out. Now, universities don't expect that, but I think in terms of picking up the language that you're going to be very much immersed in at university, it would be helpful. So yes, we do. Please do come and talk to me in advance, because there are caveats. You are narrowing down your options, but if that's where you see your destination going, then I think it's perfectly fine.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Kerr. That was really useful.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Miss Lambard just to finish off the evening.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this evening. I want to thank everybody involved, teachers who put the effort in, Mrs. Armstrong, who sat there all evening and compared and asked questions, and for you for watching and finding out more about the subjects you might be interested in doing at Bishops or wherever you may go to do your A-levels. There is one more webinar on Thursday. This covers maths and sciences. And EPQ and a few other bits and bobs, but the agenda for that evening and the timings and that went out in the email, but is also available on the website. There's a link in the live question and answer box at the top to where you can go and find out more on that. And don't forget, if you are interested, come and see us. The application form is open now, but there's no rush. It closes our applications close in February. You can save your application as you go along, but do come and see us. Come and see how the school feels if you're not already at a Bishop's, and get an idea of what's different in sixth form, because it is different to year 11, and the freedoms and responsibilities and community and all of that Bishop's brings. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found out lots, and I'll say a very good evening and good night.